Hi, everyone. This is Victoria English, top coach with Project 90. Have you ever wondered why you buy the alcohol that you buy? Well, I've got an insider who is going to spill some secrets about how the marketers target you very precisely and how they are dictating the choices you make around alcohol and your level of alcohol consumption. And if you're listening to this podcast, if you're anything like me, you're going to be alarmed and frustrated, maybe even very angry when you hear the tactics they use to help you, encourage you to increase your drinking and put money in their pockets. So if you haven't done so already, head on over to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/guide. If you're a high performer like our upcoming guest, ready to get that long-term power over alcohol you keep hearing us talk about, well, seeing is believing. So go over and book a free discovery call with me, Coach V. Go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/schedule. It's 15 minutes. It's free. We'll see if you're a fit. You may not be. And if not, that's okay. There's lots of paths. Maybe ours is the right one for you. So let's get started. I have an amazing guy with us today, Chris Kirn out of Missouri. I'll let you hear from Chris a little bit about his background in marketing and advertising, along with his experience with Project 90, why he joined, and what it's doing for his life. So, hi, Chris. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Coach V. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. So tell us a little about yourself, your work background, and how you came across the secrets you're about to spill, and also your experience with Project 90.
Yeah, you bet. Be happy to. So I'm a Midwestern guy. I was in the advertising industry for about 16 or 17 years. And more on the executional side. So, anything from, beer and wine and spirits to car dealers and soft drinks and everything in between. And that was a great career. That was a great path for me. And then I was fortunate enough to be recruited away by Pepsi. And then I spent almost 5 years at a Pepsi franchise in the Midwest, running their day-to-day operations and also handling their advertising, marketing, and packaging and those type things. And so when you called and asked me about doing this podcast, I was excited because it gave me a chance to go back in time and look at a bunch of my past notes and see maybe how I can help somebody else's journey.
Absolutely. The way we came up with this is on a P90 call recently, I pulled up some alcohol ads and we were discussing them on the group call. And Chris had so much insight just by looking at the ads. He could tell us so much about why and how they would target certain individuals based on each ad. So that was the spark I needed to come up with this idea, and Chris graciously agreed. Tell us, before we go into that, tell us a little bit about your experience with Project 90. What brought you to us? What doubts or hesitancies did you have, and how's it going for you?
Yeah, so today is day 70 in the program, and
awesome.
I feel incredibly pleased with myself, pleased with the development, and really thrilled that I made the choice to jump into the program.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit about my drinking history, if you will, is, I grew up in a small Catholic German community in Missouri, and drinking was prevalent, whether it was, in high school or after high school or as a young adult. I mean, really everything we did was built around the drink. And I didn't know any better because it was the way that I really grew up. And then as I got married and I had kids, the advertising company that I worked for, which they're great people, unbelievable company. I loved my time there. But drinking was a massive piece of the culture of that company. And I mean, I've got friends that were fired from their jobs because of getting out of control at a company party or, doing different things like that. And I was fortunate to not have that happen to me. And I think a lot of it's truly by the grace of God, because I probably was drinking just like those guys were on a day in, day out basis. But as I got older and as my kids, grew up, I wasn't an everyday drinker. So, I mean, I could come home from work and not drink. I'd quit for 30, 40 days at a time, different things like that. But my problem is I didn't know moderation. And so if I was in a group with buddies or at our cabin, traveling with my wife on vacation, whatever the case may be, occasionally there was that trigger where I just went too far. And my wife had asked me numerous times to consider getting help. But I never considered myself to have a drinking problem because I knew I could turn the switch on and off. Earlier this fall, back in mid-October, I was out of town. I was at a golf tournament, and I told her when I left that morning, I had no intentions of getting drunk that day, and I was just going to enjoy my time. And one thing leads to another, and drinks all day, and nothing bad happened other than just pissed off at myself because of letting myself get drunk. I woke up the next morning and I got in my truck. I had about a 3 or 4 hour drive home from the golf tournament. And I told myself I'm done. And I said, I don't know what it looks like. And I told myself that out loud in the truck. I said, I don't know what it looks like, but I'm done. And I immediately went on my phone for the long drive home. I immediately went on my my phone on the drive home and found the Alcohol Free Lifestyle podcast and listened to 3 or 4 hours of podcast. And Monday I thought it over, had an exploratory call, and Tuesday I joined. And here we are.
Here we are. And your life has improved in so many ways. I know your relationship with your wife, with your children. Chris has become a real role model for his children and people in his community. It's interesting, the ripple effect that happens. I'm wondering just a few things. Tell me a little bit about the process when they are targeting, you can choose, but let's say they're targeting a specific demographic. What is the process like? What are some of the top tricks of the trade?
It's a great question, and it's really truly different for every brand and every different type of a product, but obviously we're talking about alcohol here. So let's just focus in there.
Yes.
When you think about beer, obviously every beer manufacturer knows their target audience, right? I mean, they know it's, 18 to 54-year-old male. If you get into the import side, that starts to change a little bit as far as socioeconomics and, some of those type things.
Yes.
But really the first piece of the puzzle is to sit down and say, okay, where are our sales now? Where's our brand currently positioned now? How do we want to position our brand, and where do we need our sales to go? Those are the first questions that I think you have to put to paper and start to vet with a team. And these advertisers are incredibly intelligent. I mean, there are some amazing people that are building these ads. And so once they know those things, at that point in time, it's like, okay, how do we get our message to that demographic? And whether it's radio or television or out of home or social media, influencers, there's so many new ways to be able to put that message in front of your audience.
Do you think they use influencers for cheap advertising by sending them products and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, early on when the advertiser thing happened, it was traditionally just superstars and, athletes and entertainers and those type things. But, you start to see a lot more influencers now on Instagram and places like that are everyday common folk that just, were well-spoken, good behind a camera, had a reason to create a bunch of followers. And, I think one of the guys in our P90 group right now, just last week, was talking about how he's got a friend down the street who's a major influencer. He's got a corporate kitchen and bar set up in his basement, and he's just an everyday common guy. But these massive corporations are sending him things to promote on his social. And so, so it's the social game or the influencer game today is different than what it used to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a theory I wanted to pass by you. I'm not sure if you've done this exercise with me on a call yet, but there were 10 emotions identified by a researcher named Barbara Fredrickson, and they relate to an individual's experience of happiness. And those emotions are love, joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, hope, pride, amusement, inspiration, and awe. So, in this exercise that I do for our listeners who want to learn more about this, I have our members make a list of those emotions. And I ask them in one column to list how alcohol adds to the emotion and how alcohol takes away from the emotion. And without fail, the answers come back that, well, alcohol adds to the emotions for the first 30 minutes to an hour, but ultimately it takes away from those emotions, which scientifically lend themselves to overall happiness. So I had a thought. I thought, I wonder if this is maybe not this specific technique, but if marketers identify those emotions and would tailor their advertising to make that promise, because alcohol does promise all of those things. But ultimately, and if you're listening to this podcast, if you're a coach, if you're a member of Project 90, you know that those are false promises or short-lived promises, and that the downside is wretched. What do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely spot on, because when when you build an ad, you're building it based on seasonality, you're building it based on holidays, you're building it based on a lot of those experiences that you just discussed. I mean, how many times have you seen an ad where it's showing a couple in love? But really, the reason around that is, or not so much the reason around that, but really the company is trying to get a point across as to, man, you can be in love if you drink this product, and it's placed in a certain way. So as you run through those 10 things, I can tell you that we've probably executed advertising campaigns on darn near every one of those, honestly.
Right.
Maybe some of them, maybe not as much. I mean, hope. Yeah, maybe it's harder to build an ad campaign around hope. But then again, there was, early in COVID, I saw some advertising that was out there that, and I'm not in that advertising game anymore, but I still pay attention to it because I'm a student of it. And I immediately saw some, creative out there. It was for a vodka, and I don't remember what brand it was, but it talked about, how there's hope that we're going to be out of COVID soon, and to celebrate that it's almost over. And so I guess to some degree, that ad was probably geared around hope as well.
Mm-hmm. I would say the same thing. And I think we had that ad on our P90 call, and you had so much insight to that. And if you recall, our Australian mate was quite ticked off about when he learned the underlying messaging there. But absolutely. So for our listeners, I mean, without fail, the members that are coming into our program say the same thing. They say, I had an issue before COVID, but man, has it gotten worse. And if you think about it, and this is where the frustration, shock, maybe anger could come in. This was a time in history, is a time in history where we really do need to band together. And we do need community and connection, especially in those early days when we were all so isolated. And we need hope. And so here's messaging saying, we're in this together. Let's all drink this vodka together. And 2 years later, nearly 2 years later, the rates of alcohol misuse are skyrocketing. And so the question is, did it deliver on that promise? That's a great little snippet, a great little cross section to look at what Chris just said. Did it deliver on that promise of hope? Or were you drinking a highly addictive substance, which is proven to compromise your immune function, perfect for a pandemic, and pours gasoline on anxiety and depression? And yes, maybe that first 30 to 60 minutes, maybe you did feel some hope or sense of relief, forgetting about the chronic stress that we were all experiencing. But now you've got enough time to have perspective. So where are you today? Where did that ad get you today? And how many domestic violence incidents are alcohol related? They don't show that in an ad. They don't show the children witnessing their parents having yet another argument. Maybe it's not enough that the cops are called or something that dramatic. But what about the snide comments, the snarkiness, the backhanded comments, the arguments, mom or dad not coming home for dinner? They don't show that. They show you what you'd like to see. Chris, I have another question. Oh, and before we move on, I've done some research as well. Alcohol sales in 2020 were the highest in 18 years. I'm
That
not
is
talking
correct.
just takeaways, but overall sales. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I actually did some of that same research before I jumped on this podcast with you, and it's interesting because advertising spend during 2022 was flat to slightly down because they had more of a captive audience, because people weren't traveling, people were drinking a lot more packaged alcohol at their house, bars were closed, mass consumption was much higher. And so, yeah, I actually saw some of the exact same statistics out there. And, one of the interesting things is, there was a recent report that showed that 71% of all TV programming had alcohol in it. And just think about how much more TV everybody watched during COVID.
That's true.
And that just, I don't know, that was a correlation that to me that came together of holy smokes, like at the end of the day, there's between advertising and product placement and programming and the fact that we're watching so much more TV right now. And then to take it one step further, the most popular demographic to watch TV is 11 to 18 year olds. And, and there's no real policing. If a kid's going to sit down and watch TV other than maybe Nickelodeon or something like that, if they're going to sit down and watch regular programming, they're being exposed to those ads at a very young and very impressionable age.
Very young age. They move straight from Nickelodeon, where they're being told to eat sugar all the time, to the alcohol. You brought up an interesting, I don't know if you mentioned this, but the 28.4% and the 71.6%. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the federal, I mean, obviously the federal government regulates all advertising, even though there's free speech laws and everything else. Yes. They, like in the billboard industry, we didn't advertise within 500 feet of a church or a playground or a school with alcohol. Mm-hmm. There was more morally and ethically correct, regulations for us to follow there. It wasn't against the law per se, right. But as far as television programming, the federal law is that 28.4% of that type of advertising on television is allowable to be geared, or not so much geared, but to influence or be in programming for folks under 21. So if you think about that, 71.6% has to be in areas or demographics that are 21 and over, and 28.4% is 20 and under. And I never really realized that until I started, kind of prepping for some of this conversation. And to me, that was incredibly alarming that it jumped out like that.
Absolutely. What else comes to mind is, well, first of all, so convicted registered sex offenders, alcohol, and tobacco can't be within 500 feet of a school. I mean, yep. Hello, what does that tell you about the dangers to our youth? And the fact that much, 28.4% of a, what did you say, $1 billion industry?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I can't remember. It was $6 or $7 billion was spent last year in alcohol advertising in the U.S. alone.
So 28.4% of that is absolutely allowed to target our youth.
Yeah, free game. 2009, and actually had, some of these notes still I can't believe it, but still floating around on my computer.
Yeah.
In 2009, there was a study done that if they banned alcohol advertising the same way they banned tobacco advertising back in the 70s and the 90s, respectively, that youth, I'm trying to think how to articulate this. Youth consumption of alcohol would go down 24%, and youth consumption of alcohol in a binge related drinking would go down 48% if they were to ban alcohol. And that study's been out there for now, 13 years? And obviously nothing's been done with it since then. And,
Right.
and I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, because as a past advertiser, we wanted every penny we could get to place in paid media to make our budgets and our bonuses and everything else. But now you're on the other side, and you're, for the first time in your life, 70 days, 72 days or whatever without alcohol. And I'm starting to see things much differently now than I used to.
Of course. Well, we see a lot of things differently when we give up the alcohol. But as a coach, I'm always doing research on this stuff. And so for our listeners, many of our listeners are parents. And the age during which we are most vulnerable to kind of creating a blueprint for future alcohol misuse, call it addiction, call it whatever you like, potato, is when we are teens. So just soak that in for a moment. Admittedly, Chris just said they wanted every bit of influence they could muster because it lined their pockets. And so they don't care. In fact, they're banking on those future customers. And so if that doesn't outrage you for yourself, think about your children. And also talking about the marketing and regulations around it, James has created some amazing Facebook ads recently. And to see the hoops that he has to hop through in order to get these ads approved, when we are advertising a wellness, alcohol-free lifestyle, is incredible to me. However, and I understand, I'm glad that they have regulation around it, that we're not making false promises saying we can cure you and things like that. But think about all of the influencers you see who are being shipped free product, and they are on their reels or stories or posts with alcohol, touting it as a magical elixir. And there's no regulation around it. They never say you cannot drink on your posts. So it's just ironic. And just like Big Tobacco had incredible influence with their lobbyists, I know because I study this stuff, that the same thing is happening in the alcohol industry. Talk to me.
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about, James and I call alcohol attractively packaged poison. So tell me a little bit about the packaging, the way that let's say a woman like myself is targeted through packaging and even just a simple wine ad. I'm always blowing the horn about the mommy wine culture. Can you shed a little bit of light on that?
Absolutely. When I was in the advertising world, I wasn't on the packaging side, but our job was to take packaging, new packaging, creative packaging, and as James and yourself and Sarah and the rest, refer to it as attractively packaged poison. We were to take that and make it look incredibly sexy, if you will.
Yes.
Whether we were appealing to a female audience that were moms or college or men. But where I do have some pretty good experience on that is my time at Pepsi. I was in that world, right? We did work on packaging and different things like that. And, we all know that alcohol's not good for you, right? And I'm learning more about alcohol in the last 70 days than I ever thought I ever would. But at the same time, soft drinks are equally, in a lot of ways, bad for your health as well.
Yes.
And so we had created, so in the Midwest region, we had created camouflage packaging for Mountain Dew. Mountain Dew is Pepsi's number one brand. It's, it is their haymaker. And they really wanted to position it stronger with the male demographic, that 18 to 54 age bracket, that like hunting and fishing and the outdoors and all those type things. And so we worked with, a camouflage company. We worked with Dale Earnhardt Jr. as an influencer and Mountain Dew. And we brought all of that together for some packaging and launched it in the fall of 2000. And I believe it was the fall of 2014, either 2013 or 14. And it really, really worked well. And, even your non-traditional Mountain Dew drinkers were picking up the packaging because it related to what they were doing at that particular time.
Yes.
And I know I mentioned to you that kind of the same thing played with me with Busch beer. I like beer. I'm a beer drinker, or at least I should say I was a beer drinker.
You were a beer drinker.
and
not on my watch.
And we so we own a farm, and we love to hunt and fish and ride 4-wheelers and do all our fun kind of outdoor Midwestern guy stuff. And I don't particularly care for Busch beer, but years ago they came up with some incredible hunting packaging, and they would hide a Blaze orange can inside a rack or a 24 pack. And honestly, I caught myself buying Busch beer for deer season purely because I was in the hunt for that orange can. It was novelty. It was exciting. It was cool. It was something I was going to be doing for the next couple of weeks or a month.
Yep.
And and even somebody like myself who has been exposed to advertising and packaging, I wasn't cognizant enough to say, why am I buying this? I really don't even enjoy the taste, but I bought it because of that reason. And so there's so many different variables there, whether it's wine or wine or spirits. And you look at the bourbon industry. I mean, that was my go-to. And I was collecting it, and I don't know, had a few hundred bottles, in my basement and in my bar on the wall. And it was a lot of times it was purchased because the better the packaging, the cooler the name, all of those things. And it's like, I looked past the fact that this bottle of bourbon was $250 and it was going to sit on a shelf for 5 years before I cracked it open.
Yes.
It all comes back to, I honestly, the very first question you asked me in this podcast is, what does an advertiser do when they want to advertise their product? I really think that packaging is as important as that conversation.
Yes.
Because they have to meet at a pinnacle to get the conversion at the liquor store.
For sure. It's as you've heard me say on calls, that $250 bottle of bourbon has the same effect on the brain and the body as a jug of wine that you buy on the bottom shelf at the local store. So you're right. It's not a coincidence that a man with your demographic, your income, things like that, is buying Busch beer during hunting season. That's not a coincidence. And that you're treating yourself to expensive bottles of bourbon because that's a status symbol. It's not a coincidence for our listeners. I know you wine ladies out there. It's not a coincidence that we all drink wine. It's not a coincidence. We're not drinking whiskey, maybe some women, but most women are not drinking whiskey. We're drinking wine. And there's no coincidences in advertising. That's what I'm hearing you say.
There's no coincidences. I mean, everything is thought out. Like the way most advertising agencies buy media is what they call, basically, a GRP or a gross rating point. So, if Budweiser wants to say, okay, I want to buy Cape County in Missouri, and Cape County's got 65,000 people in it, and I want to hit 50% of the adult population every single day. Mm-hmm. So what happens is they come to an advertising company or a billboard company, television, whatever. And the best campaign was always a media mix campaign where you buy a little bit of radio, a little bit of television, a little bit of billboards. That way it impacts the whole entire demographic. But really, that's how advertising agencies buy is GRP. And so I want to hit 50% of the adult population every single day for the next 30 days. And okay, that's going to cost me $20,000. And so then they take that 20,000, they divvy it up, and then those advertising companies' jobs is to effectively place that media to impact, the biggest people, biggest amount of people that they can. And so when you think coincidence, nothing happens by coincidence.
Yeah.
You got an advertising agency and a panel of people building what the creative is going to look like. You have a media company executing that creative to get to as many people as you can from a pure conversion standpoint.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's alcohol or soda or tobacco-less products or car dealers. They all are doing the exact same thing, and nothing's done by happenstance.
Yes. And yeah, I like the comparisons you made between the soda and the alcohol. And most people know that soda is not good for you. It's so many empty calories, one of the leading contributors to obesity in our country. But I find alcohol to be even more insidious because people don't crash their cars. They don't get in fights. They don't diminish their career. They don't damage their children. It's really dark when you think about it. And again, I don't know that these people are bad people. It's just they're doing what they know how to do. But
I think I can liken that to my experience so I have not had a single soft drink in almost 4 years. So I haven't had a soda. When I left Pepsi in 2016 and started our own company and went and did our own thing, I pretty much went cold turkey and I've not had, I don't think I've had a soda since probably 2016 or 17. So 5 or 6 years. But when I did that, my health and wellness might've gotten better, but I knew it wasn't going to have a positive impact on my life and my marriage and my kids. But at the same time, in 70 days of giving up alcohol, I can already see a positive trend with my marriage, with the relationships with my kids, with my employees, with our customers, with just my pure energy level. And I know I've told you in the group this on a call, but I've been married 21 years and I can honestly probably count on 2 hands how many times my wife and I had a significant fight or argument or something. And every single time I can point to alcohol. There's not one scenario in my life in my married life that I can say, oh yeah, we had a massive, disagreement or argument or whatever. And it had to do about this. No, every one of them was about alcohol, whether we both got drunk and didn't get along, or quite frankly, the majority of them was me, drinking too much and upsetting her. And so you're right. The alcohol is much more insidious than giving up some of the other vices that are out there.
Yeah, well, you've heard me say, and everyone so far has been in agreement that when it comes to return on investment, I don't think there's a whole lot you can do which will have the return that this does.
I wrote a letter to my wife and kids about a week to 10 days ago when I hit, actually, I don't even think it was that long. I think it was day 65. So 5 days ago or 7 days ago, roughly. And just wanted to express to them, the journey and what I'm learning and where I've been and where I'm at and really where I'm heading. And, one of the things I told them in that is that the amount of money that I spent on this program is the single best investment I've made in myself ever. And keep in mind, I love personal, development and, whether it's Sandler sales and management, which I've been through for 20 years or, or other seminars and classes and different things. But this is the best money that I have spent for myself, my life, and my future.
That's incredible. That letter, Chris shared that with the group and it brought me to tears. I texted you that night.
Yeah,
it was it was something else. What would you say to people listening to this podcast, whether it's the first time or the 15th time? What would you say to them if they're going back and forth, or maybe the 50th? What would you say to them if they listen and they think, wow, that really resonates with me, and then they just go on with their day?
That's an incredible question, Coach V. And I've actually wrestled with that question, even myself, thinking, okay, 90 days is going to come to an end here pretty soon. And what does it look like after 90 days? The question that I would ask myself if I was not in this program, driving down the road, listening to a podcast, is how has alcohol served me? How has it served my life positively? Right. There's no denying that we've had some great times with alcohol, right? I mean, and I'm not going to deny that or try to ignore it or walk away from it. There were some amazing times in my 20s, 30s, and 40s with great friends or my wife or, family or whatever, where we drank a lot and we had a lot of fun and nobody got out of control. But at the same time, I always woke up the next morning feeling like shit, number one. Number two is for every 10 times that positiveness happened with having fun, there was always one or two times where it didn't end positively. And I was not going to throw away my company, my marriage, the relationship with my kids, my health. I wasn't going to throw it away for 2 or 3 really good times a year, which is really what drinking equated to, for me, whether it was, hunting season or in the summer on the boat or with really good buddies at a professional sporting event or on vacation. So really I come back to what I just said is how did alcohol serve me? And I can honestly say it never did.
Yes.
And that's why I am really, and I said it in my letter, and my why through this program has clearly been, my family, because I'm not going to throw that away. We've worked too hard to build this nucleus, and our kids are incredibly successful and very happy and very driven. And I'm like, man, I want to be a part of their life,
Exactly.
And so in my letter a week ago, I told them, I said, I do not see myself ever having to drink again. Now, at the same time, it's one day,
Of course.
to train yourself. But I don't envision myself going back down the path that I once went down.
I don't either. And I think what you said is profound, because as our children get older, I have 3 kids in their 20s now and a teenager. As our kids get older, for our listeners with younger kids, they have a choice to hang out with us or not, to have us as part of their lives or not. So it's what you make of it. You do reap what you sow. Well, thank you for being here, Chris. This is so insightful, and I look forward to having you interviewed by James to share more of your story. And I think you've just become such a leader in our community, and it's beautiful to see our members take all of their positive traits and attributes and fully harness them into every area of their life, and to view alcohol for what it is, something that used to be fun, but is too much of a gamble anymore. So if you're considering booking that call, what should they do, Chris?
You should absolutely listen to a podcast or two. You should absolutely go on the website and reach out just like I did. And I kind of had a motto going into this is don't anticipate, just participate. And, and because the anticipation was daunting at first, are people going to judge, are people going to judge me? And, I don't consider myself an alcoholic. I just consider myself a problem drinker from time to time. And I knew AA and some of those things were not going to be for me, because I love life, and I want to be positive, and I want to be around people that are positive. And, I didn't want to have to look myself in the mirror and say, oh, this is who I am, and these are my faults. No, I wanted to embrace them and get after it. And that's what this community's allowed me to do. And so I would highly recommend reaching out for that 15-minute free exploratory call, because it's worth the evaluation.
And that is not a paid endorsement.
That is for sure. That is for sure.
I'm not that skilled. So again, if you would like to book that call, go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/schedule. You can find the link in our show notes, and let's have a talk. Until next time, thanks for listening. Chris, thank you so very much.
My absolute pleasure.
I'm very appreciative. You're going to help others. And that's the beautiful part of this, is we help ourselves and then we pass it along. So thank you, Chris, for being here. And I'll talk to you all soon. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I want to load you up with some free stuff. If you look in the show description, there's a link there to get my guide, which is the Alcohol Freedom Formula Guide. And in that guide, I will walk you through the process and system for successfully reducing or quitting alcohol. It's the same system and process that I give to my clients inside of Project 90. And if you would like to get your hands on that guide, you can click the link in the description part of this episode, or you can go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/guide. Likewise, if you would like to be considered for Project 90 to join our community and get some accountability, some coaching, and have fun, achieve some goals over at least 90 days with our help and support, then you're invited to schedule a complimentary coaching call with one of my coaches. You can do that by clicking the link in the show description or going to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/schedule. Now, Project 90 is for over 30s only. And it's really for people who are ready to get long-term power over alcohol. You don't have to quit forever, but you will have to quit for at least 90 days with our support. Just a reminder, 95% of my content is free and plastered all over the internet. If you just Google James Swanwick and the word alcohol, you'll find that. For those of you who want additional support, if you want coaching, fun, accountability, if you realize that you can't do this on your own or you just plain don't want to, then I invite you to schedule that call and we can talk about if Project 90 is for you. If you would like to take some of my supplements, swanvitality.com is the website. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. I have a liver support product called Loving Liver, which I designed and specially formulated to help remove toxins from your liver after years of alcohol consumption. Again, there's a link in the show description. We've also got a green powder there, which turns into a green juice filled with amazing ingredients to support you and give you energy throughout the day. And there's also a magnesium product, which I take every night to help me prepare for sleep and to sleep through the night. So there's a few options there. Lastly, if this episode or the show in general has helped you or supported you in any way, I would so appreciate it if you would write a review. It really does help the show climb the rankings and expose the show to people who don't yet know about us. So if this show has benefited you in any way and you feel compelled to pay it forward, just writing a short little review, hopefully a nice one, will be so appreciated and I will thank you immensely. Lastly, if you'd like to talk to me about anything at all, feel free to send me an email at james@alcoholfreelifestyle.com. I do read and respond to every email. And you can also follow me on Instagram at James Swanwick. Send me a message there. And I look forward to connecting with you soon. Catch you on the next one.